The air inside the giant hall was heavy and cold. It smelled of iron and smoke like old machines that never rested. Hundreds of footsteps moved together, slow and quiet, pressed into the floor as if every sound was forbidden. A long line stretched from the dark entrance of the prison hall toward the glowing metal gates at the far end. The gates opened and closed with a low hum, swallowing groups of prisoners one after another. No one ever returned once they crossed inside. The walls trembled with the sound of hidden machines, each beat like the pulse of something alive and waiting. Among the many faces in that line was a young alien woman. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She tried to keep her head down, but her heart pounded so hard she thought the guards could hear it. She had heard whispers of what waited behind the gates. Breeding chambers, they called them. A place where bodies were turned into tools, where freedom and dignity were taken forever. She felt her throat tighten as she moved a single step forward, forced by the guard's sharp cry behind her. Every prisoner looked the same now, silent, broken, their eyes empty. Some walked like ghosts, their bodies moving without thought. Others shook as if the weight of the air alone was crushing them. No one dared to resist. The guards, tall and armored in black steel, carried long shock staffs that sparked with blue light. They did not need to speak. Their presence was enough to keep the prisoners moving, like cattle guided to a slaughterhouse. But there was one figure in that line who did not walk like the others. Near the back, a human man stood with his wrist bound and his head slightly lowered. Yet his eyes were different. Where others showed fear, his gaze was sharp and alive. He looked at the walls, the guards, the machines. He studied everything as if counting, measuring, waiting. There was no tremble in his step, no hollow surrender in his stare. To the others he looked strange, out of place, almost dangerous. The guards had noticed him too, but they did not act. Not yet. The young woman's breath caught when she noticed the man. For a brief moment their eyes met across the line. His gaze was steady, almost calm, as if he saw her fear and carried it with him. She quickly looked away, but the memory of that stare clung to her. It was not the look of a prisoner ready to give up. It was the look of someone who refused. Spark in the endless dark. The line moved again. Each step was a step closer to the gates. The woman's knees felt weak. She wanted to scream, to beg, to run, but there was nowhere to go. The guards would strike her down in an instant. Around her, others whispered broken prayers in languages long forgotten. The sound mixed with the hum of machines until it felt like a chorus of despair. She thought of her home, of the fields where she once walked free, of her family's laughter. All gone, all burned. She remembered the night the soldiers came, dragging her from her home and throwing her into a transport ship filled with crying voices. That night had never ended. It only stretched into this endless march, and now it would end here, in this place that turned people into breeding machines. The gates at the front groaned open, glowing with pale blue light. Another group was forced inside. Their faces vanished into the brightness swallowed whole. The line moved again. The woman's stomach twisted. She was next, but again she felt the man's presence. His steps were measured, steady. Even when the guards pushed him forward, he did not stumble. His calm was strange, unnatural in this sea of fear. For a heartbeat, the woman wondered if he was mad. How could anyone stand tall in a place like this? Yet deep inside she felt something new. A small spark of hope, buried beneath layers of terror but still alive. The guards barked another command. The woman flinched and moved forward. Her wrists ached from the cuffs. Her throat was dry. The gates loomed closer now, glowing brighter with every step. She wanted to close her eyes, but something kept them open. That human. She could not stop herself from glancing back at him. He stood taller now, his gaze locked on the gates as if challenging them. The woman felt her pulse quicken. For the first time since her capture, she wondered if the line could break. The machines above hissed. Steam poured from the vents. Sparks crackled in the distance. The air was alive with the sound of power, of control. The walls themselves seemed to whisper, "Obey, walk, surrender." And yet behind her, the human whispered a different message without a word. The woman clenched her fists. The line was moving again. Her fear was stronger than ever, but something else grew beside it. A strange question burned in her chest. If this man refused to give in, could she refuse too? The gates opened once more. The guards pushed. The prisoners cried out, and in that endless rhythm of despair, the woman felt a change. It was small, fragile, almost invisible, but it was real, because for the first time, She believed that maybe this line did not end in death. The line kept moving, dragging the prisoners toward the glowing gates. Every sound inside the hall felt heavy. The clanging of metal, the hiss of steam, the low hum of hidden engines. It was like the entire building was alive, breathing and watching. The prisoners did not speak, yet silence was louder than screams. It was the silence of people who had given up, who no longer believed they mattered. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty, as if their souls had been stripped before they even crossed the gates. The young alien woman tried not to think, but her mind would not obey. Every step she took pressed the memory of home deeper into her chest. The laughter of her brother, the warmth of sunlight, the smell of fresh soil. It felt like another lifetime. Those things did not belong to her anymore. She was only a number in the line, a body for the machine. She could not stop her hands from shaking, even though the cuffs bit into her wrists and made every tremble painful. Behind her, the human man walked with strange calm. His chains rattled, but his steps were even, his eyes alive. The woman could feel his presence even when she did not look. He was like a sharp blade hidden in the dull weight of despair. Every few moments she dared to glance back, and every time she saw the same thing. His gaze was focused, his breathing steady, as though he was not a prisoner at all, but a soldier marching toward a battle of his own choice. The guards shouted again, their voices deep and harsh. One of them struck a prisoner with the end of his staff, sparks flying as the body collapsed to the ground. The smell of burned flesh filled the air for a moment before the body was dragged away. No one looked. No one cried out. The line only moved forward as if death was as common as the sound of the machines. The young woman bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, but she did not cry. Her tears had dried long ago. The human's reaction was different. His head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowing at the guards. He did not speak, did not flinch, but the air around him felt different. The woman felt it too, though she could not explain why. His silence was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of control, like a predator waiting for the perfect strike. The line slowed. The gates ahead were stuck, their lights flickering. A loud clang echoed, followed by sparks that rained down from the ceiling. For a moment, the march stopped. The guards barked orders into their comms, distracted by the sudden fault. The prisoners stood still, breathing hard, their fear mixing with the smoke in the air. The woman's chest tightened as she waited, unsure if this pause meant something worse was coming. Then she heard it. A voice, low, steady, close. "Do not look afraid," the human whispered. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. She did not move her head, but she knew the words were meant for her. No one had spoken to her since her capture. No one had dared. She swallowed hard, unable to answer, but the words sank into her mind like fire into ice. The guards cursed as they struck the control panel, trying to restart the gates. The hum of machines stuttered, then returned stronger, louder. The line began to move again. The pause was over, but the woman felt changed. That whisper echoed in her chest. "Do not look afraid." She tried to steady her breathing, though fear still clung to her bones. She lifted her head slightly, forcing her eyes to face forward. The gate seemed even brighter now, the glow spreading like a hungry mouth ready to swallow her whole. But the words gave her something she had not felt in weeks. Choice. A thin, fragile choice, but still hers. She could let fear own her, or she could stand. The human spoke again, this time even quieter, so only she could hear. Watch them. Every step, every pattern. She wanted to turn and ask what he meant, but she dared not. Still, his tone was so certain that her eyes began to wander against her will, studying the guards. She noticed the way their hands twitched near their weapons, the way their boots struck the ground in rhythm, the way their helmets turned only when the prisoners moved too fast. She had never paid attention before. She had been too lost in terror. But now she saw things she had not seen. Small things. Important things. The woman's chest rose and fell quickly. She realized what was happening. He was teaching her to see, teaching her to think. It was madness, but it was also survival. The line reached the final stretch. Only a few groups remained before the gates would claim them. The prisoners ahead shook like leaves, some whispering prayers, some mumbling nonsense. The woman's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stay upright. Every breath was heavy, but she matched her steps with the human's rhythm. She did not know why, but it made her feel less alone. The guards pushed them closer. The glow of the gates burned against her skin. She could almost hear the screams of those who had entered before, though maybe it was only her mind. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. And when she looked back one last time, the human's eyes met hers. There was no fear in them, only a promise. And for the first time, she dared to believe that maybe the gates would not be the end. The gates moaned as they opened again, spilling pale blue light across the floor. The glow stretched like a long shadow, touching the faces of those still waiting. Every prisoner flinched at the sound except for one. The human stood steady, his eyes fixed on the movements of the guards, his breathing slow and controlled. The young woman could feel her heart racing faster with every second, but she also felt something else, a strange pull toward the calmness of the man behind her. It was as if his stillness carried a weight stronger than all the machines in the hall. A sudden crack split the silence. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, filling the air with the smell of burning wires. One of the machines above let out a violent hiss, followed by a sharp alarm. The noise echoed like a scream across the metal walls. For a moment, confusion rippled through the line. The prisoners froze, uncertain if this was the end or something worse. The guards shouted to each other, their voices harsh, their helmets turning quickly as they tried to control the scene. In that chaos, the human spoke again, his voice low, sharp, but clear enough for those nearest to hear. They are not gods. They bleed like we do. The words were simple, yet they cut through the despair like a knife. The young woman's throat tightened. No one ever dared to speak against the guards. Not here, not in this place. But he had done it as if the walls themselves did not matter. A few prisoners looked up, their eyes flickering for the first time in days, maybe weeks. It was not hope yet, but it was attention. The guards did not hear him. They were too busy repairing the fault, slamming their weapons against control panels, forcing the machines back to order. The alarms died and the gates roared again, opening wide to swallow the next group. The line moved forward, but something had changed. A whisper had been planted, a thought forbidden yet alive. The young woman dared to breathe deeper, though her body still shook. She could not stop the words from echoing inside her head. They are not gods. She turned her eyes slightly and saw the human again. His mouth was set in a line of calm defiance. He did not smile, but his presence alone was like fire pressed into the cold. Another prisoner stumbled and fell to his knees. The guards moved quickly, one of them lifting his staff to strike. The hum of the weapon filled the air. The young woman winced, waiting for the sickening sound of burning flesh. But before the strike fell, the human's voice broke the silence again. Stand. Do not give them the pleasure. The prisoner on the floor froze, his chest heaving. His eyes widened as if the words had reached into him, dragging something lost back to the surface. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up again. The guard hesitated for a fraction of a second, then lowered the staff. The line continued moving. The woman's chest tightened. Her hands trembled, not only from fear but from something else. She was watching the impossible. A man chained, surrounded by enemies, facing certain death, yet he moved others with nothing more than his voice. It was a spark. Small, fragile, but it spread. The gates opened again, brighter this time, almost blinding. The hum of machines grew louder, as though the facility itself was angry. The woman felt her body pulled forward step by step. The heat of the glow pressed against her skin, crawling like fire. She wanted to scream, but she forced her lips shut. She remembered his whisper, "Do not look afraid." The prisoners ahead vanished through the gates. Their silhouettes burned against the light and then were gone. The woman stumbled, her legs weak, but she caught herself. The human stare burned into her back. She did not know why, but it gave her strength. She lifted her head and stared at the gates with eyes wide open. Her mind was a storm. She thought of the life stolen from her, the future turned to ash. She thought of her family, her friends, her home. She thought of the endless march, the silence, the despair. And then she thought of him, this human who spoke as if he knew something they did not. Something that could shatter the line. The guards barked another command, their voices sharp. The prisoners obeyed, but the air felt different now. It was heavier, charged. The woman realized it was not only her who had heard the human. Others too. Their heads lifted ever so slightly. Their steps grew less uneven. The silence was no longer the silence of surrender. It was waiting. The woman felt her heart race. She did not understand what he was planning. She did not know if he was truly mad, or if he saw something none of them could. But she felt it. The spark was spreading, and she could not stop herself from wanting it to grow. The line moved closer to the gates. The woman was only a few steps away from being chosen for the next group. The glow stretched around her, filling her eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. Every instinct told her to collapse, to cry, to beg. But then she heard the whisper again. This time the human did not speak with his lips. His eyes said everything. Calm, defiant, unbroken. And the woman, for the first time, did not feel like prey. She felt the beginning of something else. Something dangerous. The spark had been lit. The line crept forward once more. Each prisoner dragged closer to the blinding gates. The air vibrated with the endless hum of machinery, as if the entire building was alive and angry. The young woman's legs felt heavy, her heart slamming against her ribs. Every step pulled her deeper into the mouth of despair, yet she carried something new inside her, a spark she had not known was possible. The human behind her had given her that. She did not understand it fully, but she clung to it as though her very life depended on it. The guards moved along the sides of the line, their black armor reflecting the glow of the gates. Their helmets turned side to side, their weapons humming softly, ready to strike at the smallest sign of defiance. They had done this so many times before, and they believed the pattern would never break. The prisoner shuffled, eyes down, shoulders slumped. But the human walked differently. His posture was steady, his gaze always searching. He studied every angle of the hall, every shift of the guards, every flicker of the machines above. The woman felt his presence like a shadow pressed against her back. It was not comfort, but something sharper, like the edge of a blade. She dared not look at him for long, but she did not have to. She knew he was watching, waiting, calculating. The thought made her chest ache with both fear and wonder. A prisoner near the front stumbled. His knees buckled and he crashed to the floor. The guards turned instantly, one of them raising a staff. The woman held her breath, knowing what was coming. The hum of the weapon filled the silence. But before it struck, the prisoner pushed himself up, his eyes burning with something unfamiliar. He stood straight, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. The guards paused, confused for a moment, then shoved him forward instead of striking. The woman's eyes widened. She knew why. The human's words had reached him too. Something invisible was spreading through the line, a current of defiance so faint the guards did not notice. But she noticed. Everyone did, though no one dared show it openly. The silence had changed. It was no longer only despair. It was waiting, holding its breath. The gates groaned again. Another group was swallowed. The glow washed over the prisoners, painting their faces pale blue. The woman's skin burned under the light, her breath quickening. She was so close now, only a few steps separated her from the gates. She felt her body tremble, but she forced her head higher. Her eyes stayed open. If this was the end, she would not meet it crawling. The human moved closer behind her. The chains around his wrists clinked softly, but his steps were steady, each one measured. She felt the weight of his gaze, not only on her, but on the entire hall. He was watching everything, and she knew he was waiting for something. The thought made her hands shake. What was he planning? Did he have a way out, or was this madness? One of the machines above hissed again, releasing a burst of steam that clouded the air. For a few seconds, the guard's vision blurred. The woman felt the human shift behind her. Not a stumble. Not fear, purpose. He leaned slightly forward as if ready. Her throat tightened. She wanted to turn and ask him, but she could not. The guards were too close. Still, the message was clear. Something was coming. The line moved again. The woman's chest ached with every breath. Her fear clawed at her ribs, but her spark grew hotter. She thought of her family, of her stolen life, of all she had lost. And then she thought of him, this strange human who refused to bend. If he could resist, then maybe she could too. She clenched her fists, the cuffs digging into her skin, but she did not let go. The guards barked another command. Their voices bounced across the walls like thunder. The prisoners obeyed, but their steps were different now. A few lifted their heads. A few clenched their hands. A few breathed harder, as if their lungs had been asleep until this moment. It was small. It was hidden. But it was real. The woman's pulse thundered in her ears. She felt the rhythm of the line change, like a song losing its pattern. The guards had not noticed, too focused on the gates, too sure of their control. But she noticed. The human noticed. The pattern was breaking. The gates opened again, brighter than ever. The sound of machines roared. The prisoners ahead vanished into the light. their screams swallowed before they could escape. The glow reached the woman, flooding her eyes, burning her skin. She almost faltered, but she forced herself to stand taller. Her lips trembled, but she did not bow her head. Behind her, the human shifted once more, his steps heavier, closer. The woman's heart stopped for a moment. She felt the air itself change, thick with tension, heavy with expectation. This was no longer a march to death. This was a march toward something unknown. The woman's hands shook, her breath uneven, but she lifted her head higher, her eyes locked on the gates. Her body was weak, but her spirit burned, and when she felt the human's gaze meet hers again, she knew the truth. The moment was building, the pattern would not hold. The gates were wide open now, glowing like the mouth of a beast. The hum of the machines was louder than ever, vibrating through the metal floor and pressing into every prisoner's chest. The young woman's knees almost gave way as the guards barked for the next group to step forward. She was at the edge. The blue light poured over her, blinding and hot. She could hear the faint cries from beyond the gates, or maybe it was only her mind twisting with fear. Her breath shook, her heart thundered, and every part of her body screamed to collapse. But she remembered the man's words, his eyes, his calmness. "Do not look afraid." The guards shoved them forward. Their black armor glistened, their staffs sparking with energy. One of them grabbed the woman's arm, yanking her hard. Pain shot up her shoulder, but she did not cry out. She lifted her head instead, forcing her eyes open against the blinding glow. The guard hissed through his helmet, clearly irritated, but before he could strike her down, something happened. The human moved. It was not wild or clumsy. It was sudden, sharp, precise. He lunged with a speed that seemed impossible for someone chained. His shoulder slammed into the nearest guard, sending the armored figure crashing against the wall. The sound echoed like a crack of thunder. The other guards turned instantly, their weapons raised, sparks bursting from their staffs. Chaos erupted. The prisoners gasped, some stumbling back, some crying out in fear, others frozen in disbelief. No one had ever fought back inside the hall. No one dared, but the human did. He twisted his chains, wrapping them around a guard's staff, yanking it free with brutal strength. The weapon sparked as he swung it wide, striking another guard across the helmet. The man's movements were not random. They were exact, as if every step had been planned long before this moment. The young woman's breath caught in her throat. She was frozen between terror and awe. The human turned his head just enough for his eyes to meet hers. That look was not asking. It was commanding. "Move." Her body obeyed before her mind could catch up. She stumbled back, her chains rattling. Around her, the prisoners began to panic, some trying to scatter, some falling to their knees. But a few, just a few, watched the human with the same burning eyes as the woman. Something inside them stirred, something they had buried long ago. The guards roared, their voices amplified by their helmets. Alarms shrieked across the hall, red lights flashing against the walls. More soldiers poured in from the sides, their heavy boots pounding the floor. The human fought like a storm, striking, dodging, twisting his chains into weapons. Every movement was a refusal, every blow a message. They are not gods. They bleed. The woman felt the heat of the gates at her back, the light burning against her skin. She should have been terrified, and she was, but something else filled her veins. The spark had turned into fire. She clenched her fists and looked at the guards, really looked at them. They were not untouchable. They stumbled when struck. They hesitated. They fell. One of the guards lunged for her, his staff raised high. The woman screamed, but instead of collapsing, she ducked low. The strike missed, sparking against the floor. Before the guard could swing again, the human was there, tearing the weapon from his hands and driving the butt of it into the guard's chest. The armored figure collapsed with a hollow thud. The human grabbed the woman's arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her away from the gates. "Not there," he growled, his voice steady even in the storm. "We do not go in. We go out, out." The word hit her like lightning. She had not thought of out in weeks, maybe longer. There was no out here, only forward into the gates. But he said it as if it was certain, as if freedom still existed beyond these walls. Her legs shook as he pulled her along, weaving through the chaos. Prisoners screamed, guards shouted, alarms wailed, but the human's grip never faltered. The hall was no longer silent. It was alive with rebellion. The spark had spread into flame and flame into fire. Some prisoners collapsed in fear, but others fought. One slammed his chains into a guard's helmet. Another tackled an armored figure to the ground. The air was filled with the sound of defiance, raw and desperate but real. The young woman stumbled but kept moving. Her chest ached, her lungs burned, but she did not stop. She followed the human as if he were the only solid thing in the storm. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner, every opening. He was not just fighting, he was guiding. Every strike, every step was leading somewhere. The gates behind them closed with a deafening clang. The glow faded, sealing away the horror inside. For the first time since she had been captured, the woman felt distance between her and that machine's hunger. She was still in chains, still surrounded by enemies, still in danger, but she was no longer in the line. She was no longer walking toward death. She was running toward something else. Her heart pounded harder, not with despair, but with something she had thought lost forever. Hope. Fragile. Trembling, dangerous hope. And all because one human refused to bow.